Hi, I'm Janavelli and welcome to the Kind Community Show. Today you'll hear my conversation with one of the three founders of Freestar, Eddy Dallas. Freestar is a bold and flavourful alcohol-free beer, and actually one of the first alcohol-free beer companies to be certified by B Corp.
Our production process emits 90% less CO2, we use 80% less water, we use 80% less energy and produce 70% less waste than any other beer production process. Having that formally signed off and seen as actually a prudent estimate of what we actually do was hugely, it was a huge moment. You're always nervous that somehow that you've done something wrong or something, you've missed some element. So that was really exciting, that to sort of get validation that we have created a process that no one else had done before and that it had, this hugely beneficial metrics in terms of our sustainability.
When developing Freestar, Dallas and his co-founders Felix and Charlie chose to go against the trend of big breweries who produce de-alcoholized versions of existing brands that aren't good for people and planet. They went back to the drawing board and designed a new way of brewing whilst keeping sustainable practices in mind. I was keen to learn more about Eddy's journey and how him and his co-founders are continuing to work on ensuring Freestar will be the example of transformational change in the industry.
The backdrop looks wonderful. Is that new office?
Yeah, this is our new office, which we moved into a couple of months ago, and this is our new branding, sporting on the side of the wall, New Wave drinks. It's exciting to be in the office, socially distanced, of course. Very exciting to have our own space. It's our first office, and it just sort of changes the entire, culture of collaboration between us as all the team. So it's great to be here.
Incredible, yeah, wonderful. It looks really bold. Being red and white, that's that good contrasting colours. I love it.
Yeah, I'll pass on the compliments to the marketing team. I'm obviously heavily involved in that, but we've gone for something which we really love, and that bold, eye-catching, high energy is just the kind of things that we wanted to achieve with the new branding.
Wonderful. So firstly, I'd love to know how you went from being a financial director at Propercorn to becoming a co-founder of a non-alcoholic beer.
It's a good question. I actually started my career before Propercorn, even further away from sort of alcohol-free beer business founding. So I started at Deloitte, a large accountancy firm, where I was for 7 years, learning the accounting trade, and had a great time there, got an amazing experience and great training, but I really wanted to work in a smaller business. So wanted to sort of, see the fruits of my labor more and work in a smaller team rather than being a team, one of 8,000 employees. So moved to Propercorn and was there for 4 years. And, that team was 20 people when I joined, 35 when I left. And absolutely, that was working in a small, brilliantly efficient, great team. And that really only furthered my ambition to really want to start something from the beginning myself. So it was while I was there, and actually 2 years into when I was there, that Charlie, Felix and I were actually sat at a table in a pub on a Tuesday night in January, busy Wednesdays ahead of ourselves. I was still working at Propercorn, great place, and had a busy Wednesday ahead of myself. Charlie was actually at Tesla and Felix at Sipsmith. And, we were out socializing on a Tuesday night, where we would normally have had a drink, but busy days ahead of ourselves the next day meant that we didn't want to have a hangover or any kind of fuzziness. Even nowadays, I find even after one drink, the next day you're just not that sharp. So we actually thought, we'll have an alcohol-free beer that night. We hadn't had many before that, and we were all unfortunately left disappointed by the alcohol-free beer we had that night. What we had was, great beer taste initially, and then that flavour just completely disappeared. And what returned wasn't, at the end of the sort of sip, was not also particularly beer-like. So we thought, naively, how hard could it be to create an alcohol-free beer that's delicious ourselves? And so the journey really started from there. And, that was 2 years and 400 recipes from that point that finally we were then able to hand in our notices. Actually, it was almost 2 years to the day. So in January of last year, we tasted the final kitchen batch, and we're like, right, that is good enough to throw all of our hard work and careers down the drain, not down the drain, but, and hand in our notices. And we did our first manufacturing run in May of last year, which is when we all went full time. And, and the roller coaster has only increased in ups and downs since then.
Yeah, that learning curve just goes whoop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hugely exciting. No, my time at Propercorn was hugely invaluable to really helping me understand how small businesses work, and realizing that there is no one to turn to ask for advice. A lot of the time, you've just got you've got a problem and you've got to solve it yourself.
What do you think are the biggest misconceptions to alcohol-free drinking alternatives, and how do you tackle this when you created Freestar?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So when we first started, when 3.5 years ago in January, almost 4 years ago now, there weren't many great alcohol-free drinks out there, and the common misconception about all of them then, which still pervades now, is the fact that they don't taste great and they don't meet up to the taste of alcohol-full drinks, and that it's slowly changing, more and more rapidly each day. But consumers are understanding now how great alcohol-free drinks can be. In every single category of it, would be that beer, cider, wine, spirits. There are great alcohol-free drinks coming out every day, and so the consumer is slowly understanding more and more that great alcohol-free drinks can exist, and that they can absolutely meet the sort of taste complexity that you're longing for in that particular moment. Taste is the sort of first misconception, and then I suppose the other one, which is, I think, disappearing more and more and more rapidly, is that sort of social pressure. 10 years ago, it would have been unlikely you would be in a social situation, be that in the pub, bar, restaurant, or at home, where if you'd ordered an alcohol-free drink amongst mates, it would have been unlikely for it to have avoided comment from the rest of the group. And nowadays, that kind of situation really, exists less and less. And actually, even if someone makes a comment now, actually, probably the rest of the group will turn around and go, come on, mate, it's not 1995 anymore. And so that social pressure is definitely going more and more, and actually even more pronounced in the younger generations. It's actually a status symbol not to drink in a lot of university and Gen Z communities.
What do you think sparked that change in mindset?
I think it is partly due to health, and partly due to a wanting to just get on with one's life. So obviously the health side of things, it's undeniably more healthy if you don't drink lots and lots versus not drinking at all. But actually drinking moderately is again a lot more healthier than drinking a lot. So there's the health side of things, and then there's also people just are aware a lot more of what they want to do with their lives, what they want to do with their career, where they find happiness and purpose. And ultimately, if you go out and have lots of alcohol and wake up the next day, you're not as efficient in trying to achieve those goals. And an increasing awareness from young and old of what they want to do with their lives sort of has allowed people to sort of think a bit more that actually going out every evening and drinking more is not necessarily helpful for that.
One thing I'd love to know is that, did you always have sustainability in mind when you, Felix and Charlie, were in the ideation phase, or was it more of an epiphany moment when you were learning about the brewing processes that you realized this was something you needed to focus on?
Yeah, so we realized, we always wanted to have, sustainability at the core of what we were going to do. We were always going to do, it was always a feature in the conversations that we had. And so it was, from the outset, when we were making decisions about anything, it was, and, when you're making a product that ultimately is not biodegradable, or not every element is, there are always decisions where you are essentially putting more stuff into the world. And so, the constant, can we remove plastic from this element of the business, or can we do this in a more sustainable way, or can we source this more locally, was always a live conversation and discussion that we had. And unfortunately, when you're starting out as a business, the sort of thing that trumps absolutely everything is it cheaper? And so quite often we'd have to be like, well, unfortunately, we just don't have the money to, make sure that is completely plastic free or source that from within 50 miles. So that was always a very live conversation with us. And then actually along the way, we discovered, actually, I was already going through the process of B Corp certification with proper corn. And so, was very aware of the benefits of certifying as a B Corp and how that can hold you to account. And it acts as a really useful framework to always bring into those discussions. So we can discuss B Corp more later, but that was always there from the outset. You mentioned the production phase or the production process and how that is a lot more efficient. It was already front of mind trying to, create a very sustainable business. And so when we understood the existing ways of making alcohol-free beer, which are broadly ferment, create beer, create alcohol, and then remove alcohol, that really struck us as, pretty inefficient and pretty wasteful. So that, coupled with the fact that you're removing alcohol and therefore removing flavour, felt that the whole process needed to be reworked, because it's not only unhelpful for the end product's flavour profile, but it's incredibly inefficient. And so the production light bulb was, only furthered our ambition that we could do this in a much more efficient way.
Wonderful. I noticed some of your incredible sustainable achievements in the intro, but can you talk us through a bit more about the materials that you're using and the commitments you made?
So the materials we're using, I take it you mean from that, the ingredients and the cases and paper, etc.
Yes, yeah, the less water consumption, how that impacts energy, but
sure.
From the ingredient side to that.
Yeah. Sorry. So our production process, because it doesn't involve any fermentation, we have a much quicker production process. So we add all of our ingredients to a tank, and we can blend them in a process that takes 24 to 48 hours, that literally starts with ingredients in tank and then just mixing the tank, rather than the beer fermentation process, which involves several tanks, a fermentation phase, letting the tank sit for up to 2 months, and then a packaging phase. So our production process can be done in 48 hours, from ingredients adding to bottling and casing, versus 2 months. And in that, you are not only saving all the energy that is required to hold the tanks, but you don't have the fermentation phase, which emits a lot of CO2 and uses a lot of water. And then you have to throw away a lot of the raw materials. So basically, in all of that, we add the ingredients to the top of the tank, and then 2 days later, we empty the tank into bottles, cans, or kegs. And the only wastage is what is within the walls of the tank and the pipes. So just cleaning that out is that's the only wastage, and that is perfectly fine to just be washed out and go down the drain. So we have minimal wastage in any of our liquid. Which is great and something we're super proud of. In terms of the commitments that you mentioned, so we've committed to being net zero by 2030. Actually, we think we will get there earlier. We're a small business, and if you look at BrewDog already being net zero, being a much larger organization, that is, a hugely impressive feat to have already achieved. And so something that, really we look at and go, come on, by 2030, we should be hugely reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, as a company, rather than just being at net zero. So we've got a commitment to be net zero by 2030, but hopefully bringing that forward by several years. And also, and this is a more or less, concrete at this stage, but we really want to create, once we have different markets in which we operate, we really want to have market specifically sourced recipes for that market. So for example, the UK, all of the ingredients and raw materials will be sourced from the UK and service that market. And then equally, if we operate in wherever it may be around the world, all of the raw materials and ingredients will be sourced from that particular, ideally country, but we may have to, broaden that sphere to be sort of maybe 1,000 miles. And that is, for us, our own internal big holy grail of really where we want to get to from a sustainability perspective. As I mentioned, it's not fully formed, but it's broadly summed up by having, a locally sourced product for the local market. And that's what really Freestar wants to do going forward.
Wonderful. Eddy, could you talk us a bit more through the actual materials that you're using?
Sure. Oh yes, sorry. So we have our raw materials are the same as any beer, which is broadly malted barley and various hops. We source them at the moment from the UK and Europe. Unfortunately, it was hard enough to create a beer without ever fermenting, and at the same time sourcing it locally. So, as mentioned, we haven't achieved that yet, but they're from predominantly Europe and the UK, and so that's where we source our raw material, our ingredients from. In terms of packaging, so we have just gone through a phase of removing all of the, or removing most of, we're about 99% plastic free with our packaging. So all of our cases are plastic free. Whenever we send out from any of our depots, it's all plastic free. The label, we really wanted to get completely plastic free, but there are sometimes decisions that you need to make which are tough, and unfortunately the back of our label has got a bit of plastic on, but the front is all paper. One day we will be able to get it all to be paper. And throughout the supply chain, we still use, and this is a common problem in all consumer goods, there is still no suitable alternative for plastic in things like shrink wrapping pallets, and it's mainly shrink wrapping pallets, but we are 99% plastic free, and are trying to, and working with actually B Corp in trying to understand how to remove plastic from all of the areas that at the moment it just is the only solution.
Wow. Eddy, I'd love to, after the podcast, perhaps make some suggestions on a couple of other startups we're working with.
Oh, yes, please.
That have got a seaweed-based plastic wrap alternative.
Oh, nice. So thank you. Already correct. I was about to caveat, it's the only alternative, and I knew I was hoping that I would be corrected. Yes, I'd love to hear more about that. That sounds amazing.
Amazing. You touched on it a little bit there. So what's been perhaps still some of the biggest challenges faced when making sustainable practice an integral part of your business decisions?
Yeah, it is. I suppose it was really initially, it's that as soon as before we'd actually sort of discussed about B Corp, when those initial phases, just like, well, you're just cost driven. And then there's a change in mindset about and behavior about making sure that the long-term perspective is always considered, and what is the long-term impact on the environment or the community in which you live as a result of making that decision. And it was a sort of it just getting that to be habitual was the sort of biggest challenge. But now it's much more, any discussion we have about anything going forward, any change of packaging is always, anyone from any department. We're a 5-man team at the moment, but any person will come up with a suggestion, and then they will caveat that with, this is what I think is the environmental impact, and this is what I think we can. If it's not the optimal sustainable choice, people will often come with, but I think we'll ride out having, for example, a label with a plastic back for this amount of period, and we think that we will be able to get, for example, the vibrancy on a full paper label by this stage, or we will be able to print onto cans or print onto bottles and do away with labels altogether within this kind of time frame. So trying to get that change in habit was the sort of first step. But because we're a young business, actually we've done that early, and hopefully that pervades through discussions going forward.
Why was B Corp becoming B Corp certified so important to you guys, and what was the journey like? So
it was really important for us. For one of the main reasons was the fact that it validated our. Well, it was not necessarily an assumption. We'd done work behind it to, we were certain it was a more sustainable process, but having a third party come in review our process and sign it off and confirm all of the stats around it being, our production process emits 90% less CO2, we use 80% less water, we use 80% less energy, and use 70%, produce 70% less waste than any other beer production process. Having that formally signed off and seen as actually a prudent estimate of what we actually do was hugely, was a big moment. And actually, we were, even though we checked and double checked the numbers, when you submit something and, it took, it was supposed to come back in a week, then it was 2 weeks, then it was 3 weeks. And when it came back, and actually the only questions they asked were on certain other elements, which were just more admin questions, it was a huge moment. You're always nervous that somehow that you've done something wrong or something, you've missed some element. So that was really exciting, that to sort of get validation that we have created a process that no one else had done before, and that it had this hugely beneficial metrics in terms of our sustainability. So that was a really big element of being certified as a B Corp. And then, getting the certification as a B Corp is just hugely, it's not easy, and it takes a while. So the journey for us was quite long, as it is for sort of everyone. But because it's long, it means it sort of spreads out the sort of the hours that you need to put into it. We probably submitted initially in September 2018, and then you have a year to then get all of your answers together. So you sort of do the test, and then you have a year to produce all the documentation. And then, so in September 2019, we had everything ready, and then we didn't get fully certified because there's lots of back and forth until July this year. But during that time, and B Corp are amazing at helping you understand, really digging into the details of your own internal systems, etc., and help you build, anything where you're, actually we hadn't thought about that. We don't have a policy around that. When it's like, well, and B Corp say, well, why don't you implement this policy? And they help you build the policy. So, it was a journey that was long, but actually every step of the way, they are helping you to improve. So going through the certification process helps you improve anyway. As mentioned, it was, about almost 2-year process for us.
What would you like other companies to learn from Freestar and the transformational change so desperately needed in this time?
I think that from what I would always say to any other brand, big or small, is, start as early as possible, because it does take time. But even if you don't certify, the process is incredibly helpful at making you a more sustainable business. So as I mentioned, they are helping you through the process improve in all of the different aspects of your business that they look at. And they really have deconstructed, business into all of the different elements where, as a business, you impact the community and the environment around you. And so even if you don't, get the 80 points out of 200 that you need to certify as a B Corp, you will be able to definitely improve, and you will implement processes along the way that will help you get closer to that. So even if you didn't certify straight away, you might certify in 2 or 3 years. And every step of the way, you will be improving and shaping your business as one that considers the long-term impact of how you impact the community and environment around you.
What companies do you take inspiration from, and which leaders do you admire?
So I think that, as mentioned before, BrewDog, having already been, a net reducer in carbon dioxide, is hugely impressive. Especially, they have grown so quickly, and managing that kind of growth is really hard. But then staying disciplined about, again, making sure decisions that you make are not just for short-term gain, but for long-term positive impact on everyone around you. Now that is, and the BrewDog are to be admired for many different reasons, but in terms of sustainability angle, we really admire BrewDog having achieved that net reduction in CO2 already. Patagonia are always one that we always think about, and actually in the very early days, Charlie, Felix, and I, even before we sort of thought about certifying as B Corp, Patagonia was that, it's amazing how they always did things that, that regardless of the cost, it was always thinking about the environment, and that's, hugely admirable from our point of view. I suppose the other one is proper corn. I had great time there, and even from when I first joined, you could really tell that being a force for good was built in their DNA. And then they certified just as I was leaving as a B Corp. So I went through the whole process with them, but they were, even before certifying as a B Corp, wanting to be super sustainable was absolutely part of their DNA. Ryan, one of the, Ryan and Cassandra, Ryan in particular is absolutely, that is, something he was driving the agenda for in every single department, day in, day out. And, he was, really quite inspirational.
Thanks, Eddie. Finally, what's next for Freestar? What are you most worried about, and what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, I think it would be the one thing we are most hopeful for is, without a shadow of a doubt, is a vaccine. I think that, that is at the back of everyone's mind, and to say anything else in this time is, that is going to, without a doubt, benefit every single person's life in the UK and beyond. So we just hoping that this vaccine, or these vaccines, any one of the 160 that are in production, are as successful as they have claimed to be in early testing, and that we can open out the economy and people can get their lives back to normal. And once we get that up and running, then our hope is that we can really get back out into great pubs, bars and restaurants, so that when people can enjoy Freestar for the first time, it is in that awesome environment in a UK pub, bar, restaurant, or even festival. So that's where we sort of hope to get from a just a business sort of brand growth point of view. And then we will also really want to start solidifying this. I mentioned trying to locally source all of our ingredients. That is something that we want to get up and running, and get to a sort of size where we can start choosing ingredients and raw materials from the UK and it actually be affordable. I mentioned earlier that constant balance between affordability and sustainability is something that we sort of grapple with day to day. And finally, we recognize that this pandemic has caused a huge amount of unemployment, and that unemployment unfortunately has been felt most harshly by the young. So we in October launched an initiative called Jobtober, and that initiative extends way beyond October, but it started with a mentoring hotline that allowed for anyone who's just got a job or looking for a job to call up and get advice as to from anything from their CV, interview prep, or even before that. A lot of people have left university and don't have an understanding about exactly which industries they want to go into. So we have, us as a team, plus lots of different mentors have signed up from lots of different industries to allow to offer advice to young people who are out of a job and need some guidance as to where to take their lives next, and also just give them some confidence that this is only temporary, but we are here for them, and we can give them advice going forward, and that really encapsulates what we stand for as a brand. We really want to champion young people, and our alcohol-free beer sits in the evening space where traditionally alcohol has dominated, and there is a real change in this generation that you don't need to go out and drink alcohol, and you can have an alcohol-free drink, but water, soft drinks, lemonade don't meet your needs in that moment, and so we are a brand for this change in generation, and we also want to help this young generation, and that is the mentoring hotline that will continue well beyond October, and be seen as a way for young people to connect with Freestar and really launch and continue and grow their careers through us.
What a wonderful initiative. Could you perhaps read out the line, or how do people get in touch with that mentoring line?
Yes, so on our website there is a mentoring hotline, and on there are all the details. So if you go to www.freestar.co, there is the mentoring hotline details there, and you just sign up there and we will link you with a mentor, and we have mentors from every different industry and an increasing array of mentors. So it doesn't matter what career you want to, career path you want to go down, it doesn't have to be alcohol-free beer, but we will find you a mentor that you can speak to once, as many times as you want, and really help get advice about getting into your dream career and then progressing within that.
Yeah, hats off to Freestar. Thanks for that. I support you where I can on that one. So if there's anything I can do to help in that initiative, do let me know. Put my hat in the ring there to support where I can.
Thank you.
So rightly so. Finally, tell us where we can find you and pick up a case of our own.
Nice. Yeah. So we are in about 130 stores in Sainsbury's, and actually if you go to our website, you can see the map of where those stores are. We are also on Ocado, Farm Drop, we are in Planet Organic, and of course we are on our own website as well. And if I will send round a link or a discount code for all of the Kind community to use for their first orders. And everyone can check out our new branding and try our delicious, never fermented and super sustainable and fully flavoured alcohol-free beer.
If you were inspired by my conversation with Eddy, please remember to subscribe, leave us a review and share it with anyone you think would love to join our community. I'm Janavelli and you've been listening to The Kind Community Show.